The room was designed to impress. Polished oak table stretching the length of the chamber, flags standing at perfect attention along the walls, screens glowing with classified maps and shifting data. A low hum from the ventilation mixed with murmured conversations as high-ranking officers filed in, confident, loud in quiet ways. When she entered, no one paused. No heads turned. She moved with measured steps, uniform immaculate, cap pulled low enough to cast a faint shadow over her eyes. To most of them, she was just another officer, perhaps an aide, perhaps a liaison, certainly not someone worth acknowledging. A colonel leaned toward another and whispered something with a grin, eyes flicking in her direction before returning to the display on the screen. She took a seat near the far end of the table without comment, hands folded, posture straight, listening. The briefing began with confident voices and bold assumptions. Timelines were thrown around casually, risks minimized, contingencies waved off with practiced bravado. She watched closely, noting the gaps no one mentioned, the overconfidence layered beneath polished language. A major spoke at length about terrain advantages, conveniently ignoring weather patterns that could cripple their plan. Another officer interrupted him, louder, asserting dominance through volume rather than insight. The room rewarded that behavior with nods and smirks. No one asked her for input. No one even checked her nameplate. She remained silent, her expression unreadable, absorbing every word as if patience itself were a strategy. As the discussion dragged on, the arrogance grew heavier. A lieutenant scoffed openly at a concern raised on the screen, dismissing it as unlikely, drawing laughter from a few seats down. She shifted slightly in her chair, the only sign that she had heard something worth correcting. Years of command had taught her when silence was useful, and when it became dangerous. Still, she waited. The mission, the people who would carry it out, mattered more than bruised egos. She let them talk themselves into comfort, into certainty, into the illusion that they had already won. Then the projector froze, the room pausing with it. Voices overlapped as someone tried to fix the issue. In that brief lull, she stood. The sound of her chair sliding back was not loud, but it was sharp enough to slice through the noise. One by one, heads turned. Irritation crossed a few faces. Who was interrupting? She stepped forward into the light, boots steady against the floor, and calmly reached up. The moment stretched as her fingers touched the brim of her cap. She removed it slowly, deliberately, revealing the insignia that had been hidden in plain sight. The effect was immediate and absolute. Words died on lips. A colonel straightened as if pulled by a string. Someone inhaled sharply. Recognition rippled through the room, followed by disbelief. Medals, rank, the weight of years in combat zones and command centers, suddenly they saw it all at once. She met their eyes without challenge, without satisfaction, only with certainty. This was not a reveal for drama. It was a correction. When she spoke, her voice was calm, even, carrying effortlessly across the room. She addressed the flaws in the plan with precision, referencing data they had overlooked, scenarios they had ignored, lives they were about to gamble without realizing it. Each sentence landed cleanly, impossible to argue with. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Authority sat naturally in her tone, earned rather than claimed. By the time she finished, the room felt smaller, quieter, reshaped. The laughter from earlier was gone. Smirks had turned into focus. Chairs shifted as officers leaned forward, not away. Orders replaced. Opinions. Questions were asked carefully now, respectfully. She placed her cap back under her arm, not as a symbol, but as an afterthought. Power hadn't entered the room when she stood up. It had been there from the beginning, waiting for the moment it became impossible to ignore. The room did not return to noise after she finished speaking. Instead, it settled into a disciplined hush, the kind that comes when certainty replaces ego. Officers adjusted their seats, some clearing their throats, others glancing back at the screens as if seeing the data for the first time. She remained standing at the head of the table now, not because she had claimed the position, but because no one else dared to occupy it. The projector flickered back to life, casting maps across her uniform, lines of terrain and threat zones moving over medals that had been earned in places most of them had only studied on paper. She began again, this time walking them through the operation step by step, restructuring it with the confidence of someone who had led men and women into chaos and brought them back. She spoke about timing, not as minutes on a clock, but as windows of human endurance. She addressed terrain not as colored lines, but as heat, exhaustion, and fear. When she talked about enemy positions, she didn't rely solely on intelligence reports. She referenced patterns, habits, the small mistakes adversaries repeat when they think no one is watching. Every point carried the quiet authority of lived experience. Some of the officers nodded instinctively, their training recognizing truth before pride could interfere. Others struggled, hands tightening around pens, jaws set as their earlier dismissals echoed in their minds. One colonel finally spoke, choosing his words carefully, questioning a revised extraction route. She didn't shut him down. Instead, she listened, really listened, then answered with patience, acknowledging the concern while explaining the cost of the alternative. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about winning a mission. That distinction changed the energy in the room more than her rank ever could. As the minutes passed, the hierarchy subtly reorganized itself around competence rather than assumption. Officers who had dominated the earlier discussion now spoke less, while those with sharper insights leaned forward, encouraged by her openness. She invited input, but she filtered it with precision, accepting what strengthened the plan and discarding what didn't, without humiliation or praise. The room began to move in rhythm, like a unit falling into formation. Confidence returned, but this time, it was grounded. She paused at a satellite image and tapped the screen lightly. "This is where people get hurt if we rush," she said, her voice steady. The words hung heavier than any reprimand. Everyone understood she wasn't speculating. She was remembering. For a brief moment, the polished room felt far away, replaced by dust, darkness, and the sound of radios cutting in and out. No one laughed now. No one interrupted. A young lieutenant near the end of the table hesitated, then raised a concern about civilian presence. Earlier, such caution might have been brushed aside. She turned to him fully, meeting his eyes, and asked him to elaborate. As he spoke, gaining confidence, she nodded once. "Good catch," she said simply, and adjusted the plan to account for it. The lieutenant sat straighter, realization dawning that this was what real leadership looked like. When the briefing ended, there was no dramatic dismissal. She gave final instructions, clear and concise, assigning responsibilities with precision. Salutes followed. Not rushed, not automatic, but deliberate. As the officers filed out, the earlier arrogance felt like something from another lifetime. Conversations were quieter now, purposeful. A few paused to thank her. She acknowledged them with brief nods, already focused on what came next. Left alone in the room, she finally exhaled, just once. The cap rested on the table beside her. She picked it up, not as a symbol of dominance, but as a reminder of duty. Respect, she knew, was never taken. It was corrected into place when truth and responsibility made it unavoidable. The air outside the briefing room was cooler, sharper, carrying the distant rhythm of a base in motion. Boots on concrete, engines humming, radios crackling with purpose. She walked the corridor alone, cap now settled back where it belonged, her pace unhurried but decisive. Behind closed doors, the meeting had ended, but the mission had only just begun. The building seemed to react to her presence now. Officers stepped aside instinctively, conversations lowered, salutes offered without hesitation. Not because of the reveal, but because word traveled fast when certainty replaced doubt. In the operations bay, the team was already assembling. Men and women checked gear, ran diagnostics, and reviewed updated maps, the revised plan flowing through the room like an electric current. She moved among them without ceremony, stopping here to adjust a harness strap, there to ask a quiet question about ammo counts or weather timing. Her leadership wasn't loud, it was precise. Every glance, every correction communicated the same message: you are seen, and you matter. The team felt it, even if they couldn't name it. She gathered them briefly, not for a speech, but for clarity. She outlined the mission in clean, direct language, emphasizing the changes and the reasons behind them. There was no embellishment, no attempt to inspire through words alone. Instead, she spoke about trust. Trust in training, trust in each other, trust in the plan because it had been built to protect lives, not egos. Heads nodded, jaws set, confidence settled in, calm and steady. As the final checks concluded, a helicopter roared to life outside, its vibration passing through the floor. She watched her team file out, each one carrying their own weight of fear and resolve. At the door, a senior operator paused, meeting her eyes. "Good plan," "Ma'am," he said simply. It wasn't flattery. It was acknowledgement. She returned a single nod, the exchange complete without further words. Hours later, she stood in the command center, eyes fixed on live feeds and scrolling data. The room was quiet except for controlled voices and the soft beeping of monitors. She tracked each movement with focus that bordered on intensity, adjusting resources, authorizing shifts, making decisions that balanced urgency with restraint. When complications arose, as they always did, she didn't react with panic. She absorbed the information, recalculated, and issued new directives with the same calm she had shown in the briefing room. The team responded seamlessly, trusting the process because they trusted her. The mission unfolded not as chaos, but as controlled momentum. Obstacles were met and neutralized. Civilians were avoided. Extraction windows held. One by one, green indicators replaced yellow and red. Each confirmation felt less like relief and more like validation of discipline and preparation. She allowed herself no celebration, only focus, until the final call came through. Mission complete, all personnel accounted for. Only then did she lean back slightly, hands resting on the edge of the console. The room exhaled with her. Quiet smiles appeared, shoulders relaxed. There were no cheers, no dramatic gestures. Professionals understood the weight of what had just been avoided as much as what had been achieved. She thanked the team succinctly and dismissed them, knowing rest was now part of readiness. Later, alone again, she stepped outside into the fading light. The sky stretched wide and calm, indifferent to rank, struggle, or victory. She removed her cap briefly, not to reveal authority this time, but to feel the air against her skin. Power, she reflected, was never about being seen. It was about responsibility carried when no one was watching. She placed the cap back on, turned toward the base, and walked forward, already focused on the next decision that would need to be made.